Regional Comprehensive and Economic Partnership, or RCEP, has become a reality as the ASEAN plus China, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, Australia went ahead and signed the deal without India. India not joining the RCEP has been receiving mixed responses from the financial world, as most welfare economists have applauded the government's decision, while few business economists and trade specialists like Arvind Panaghadia, a Columbia University professor specialized in international trade and alumni of University of Rajasthan, my alma mater. According to Arvind Panaghadia, India should use not signing the RCEP right now to negotiate a better deal with the RCEP in the future, and should not reject it altogether and eventually become part of it. He wants India to become a beneficiary of the free trade regime in the post-Trump era. But both Hindu nationalist and socialist and communist school of economics are standing very much against the signing of RCEP. The RSS brainchild Jan Jagrati Manch clearly opposed the RCEP and dubbed RCEP as the vehicle to crush Indian manufacturing by China and dairy sector by cheap imports from New Zealand and Australia. Now, having spoken the summary in a breath, let me take a minute to explain what RCEP is all about. RCEP is a free trade agreement between 10 ASEAN countries and its 5 trade agreement partner Japan, South Korea, China, New Zealand and Australia, but not India, at least as of now. Now, with RCEP, the people of these signatory countries would enjoy a tariff-free trade. Modi-led India was quite eager to sign RCEP, as it took RCEP as a stepping stone for the development of Indian industries through this free trade agreement. India hasn't been part of any trade bloc in the world. SAARC has failed miserably due to political differences. So India felt a dire need to enroll itself into a trade bloc. And what's better than entering into a trade bloc with ASEAN, India's longest trading partner? And India under Modi government had almost signed the RCEP, as we completed 28 out of 31 trade negotiations with RCEP signatories. But suddenly, Modi government backed off due to upcoming elections in 2019, fearing a backlash from the dairy farmers and BJP's parent organization, the RSS. RCEP talked about elimination of tariff on majority of goods by leaving out few goods outside of it. Especially on the insistence of India, the dairy sector, the dairy products were left out and some services were given exemption. Now, when RCEP is a reality, then 92% of the goods would enjoy free trade regime among the RCEP signatory countries. But why India didn't join RCEP? Well, there are 8 grounds that India had objections and reservations about. The first one being the unavailability of safeguard against cheap imports from China flooding Indian market. RCEP participation would expose Indian manufacturers to a flood of cheap and mainly China-made imports. An unequal free trade facilitated by this RCEP would jeopardize millions of local businesses and industries. The second objection was the unavailability of auto-trigger mechanism. India believed to have sought the auto-trigger mechanism for increasing tariffs on a particular commodity if import of such commodity from other RCEP partners reaches beyond a certain limit. But other RCEP signatory of the RCEP declined to honor India's request for an auto-trigger mechanism. The third reason being the unavailability of safeguard against China using non-tariff barriers against Indian exports to China. It's not like as if India don't produce anything worth exporting to China. Indian pharma exports can be a big and huge success in China, as Indian manufactured medicines are cheaper than Chinese. But China don't allow Indian imports and impose certain non-tariff barriers like sanitary and phytosanitary measures on Indian exports to China to artificially keep its imports of Indian products low and supports its own Chinese pharma industry. The fourth one is the dispute over the base year to reduce tariff. Indian demand was that the year 2014 be used as the base year to reduce tariffs on the product traded as part of the pact. Was not met, and using a base year before 2014 would mean a drastic drop in the import duties on these products imposed by India. fifth reason is the objection regarding the possibility of circumvention of rule of origin, especially by China via ASEAN countries. China even today use this method of possible circumvention of rule of origin of a product to fool European and American, and to some extent Indian government as well. European and Americans had raised restrictions and tariff on cheap Chinese goods, but China adopted a different strategy. They kept manufacturing goods in China, but after manufacturing those goods, moved them to Taiwan or South Korea. And once Taiwan put a custom stamp of made in Taiwan, then that good escapes the tariff and non-tariff imposed restrictions imposed on the Chinese goods. Now formally it is a Korean or Taiwanese good, but in reality it was manufactured in China. This method would be most commonly used by the Chinese even within the RCEP. The seventh objection being the rising trade deficit with the countries of RCEP, especially China. India has a huge trade deficit with signatories of RCEP, and specifically China. India has a trade deficit worth around $50 billion a year. India's import of Chinese goods increased by 22% in 2017-18, but this got reduced to just 3% rise in 2018 and 19. But after the border skirmish between Indo-China on Himalayas, India decreased and successfully decreased the import of Chinese goods by 7%, which is highest ever decrease since 2012. As of now, India employs anti-dumping measures on Chinese goods and Japanese steel. But once India becomes a signatory to RCEP, India won't be able to employ this WTO-approved anti-dumping measure. The eighth reason being the fear of cheap dairy imports from Australia and New Zealand hurting Indian dairy sector. India is the largest producer of milk products in the world, but our per capita consumption is just a glass per person a day. If government wants to reduce the milk prices in India, it would have to do it by either increasing and promoting the domestic production of milk or importing milk products from Australia or New Zealand. And foreign players like Australia and New Zealand have been dying to enter Indian dairy market, as they have huge surplus of milk products and India has a huge deficit of consumption due to high prices of milk products. And signing the RCEP would bless the Australians and the New Zealanders with an opportunity to export milk products unregulated into India at the cost of our own dairy farmers. So if an Australian farmer is allowed to enter India, then dairy producers like the Amul or Mother Dairy would have to half the price just to compete with China, with these cheap Australian imports. And in return, they would have the price paid to the dairy farmers for milk procurement. This is a choice between the farmer and the consumer. As of now, government has been sane in choosing farmers. But let's see for how long. Now the last but not the least is a united opposition from the left parties, Congress and the RSS. India's political spectrum is highly charged and divided. You have the RSS, the Indian National Congress and the CPIM. All these are completely in disagreement over all major political and social issues. But as far as free trade is concerned, that they are united. RSS, CPIM and Indian National Congress, all three got united in opposing the government signing the RCEP. Modi government took part in 28 out of 31 trade negotiations in the RCEP and was the front runner and was quite eager to sign RCEP. But anticipating a backlash from its own parent organization, the RSS, the Modi government backed off in the very last round last year, right before the general election 2019. And signing the RCEP this year after having a border skirmish with China that claimed the lives of 20 bravehearts would have become an economic suicide for the Modi government, which haven't yet recovered from the demonetization debacle. So is it over for India now? Well, no. India, as an original negotiating participant of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership or the RCEP, has the option of joining the agreement without having to wait 18 months as stipulated for new members in the term of the Mega Trade Pact. RCEP signatory states said they plan to commence negotiations with India once it submits a written request of its intention to join the pact in writing, and it may participate in meetings as an observer prior to this accession. So India is most likely to sign a trade pact in the future, but let's hope by not yielding its most vulnerable communities at the mercy of the quality of the free trade monsters.